again, my little yarnivores and spiderettes. Fiber Spider back again with another tutorial just for you. Hello there! How are all of you doing? So delighted to be here with you. Today we are going to be doing a little bit more Tunisian crochet. This is the Tunisian moss stitch. It's gorgeous, it's easy, it's got a squishy texture, and I think it's lovely, especially in this beautiful variegated colorway. For today's example, I used Red Heart Super Saver Jumbo in the colorway of Wildflower. It's a weight of 4 yarn, and so I used, for this swatch, a size K 10.5, which is a 6.5 millimeter size crochet hook. My focus is always funky, isn't it? You can kind of see it, you know. You can, of course, use whatever yarn you want, whatever hook size you want. Honestly, for Tunisian, the vast majority of the time, I would say bigger is better so that you have a lovely drape to your fabric. And this, unlike many Tunisian stitches, this does not curl at all, at least with my gauge and my tension. Did not have the curling problem whatsoever. I think that this would make an incredible blanket, especially a nice snuggly wuggly baby blanket, a scarf, a wrap, you know, really what have you. Now, the front side of this, I love the blending of the colors. Now, I will also show you the back to show you that it has a very striking look to it, just as beautiful, but different. So, technically, you could say that this is a double-sided piece. Just depends on your perspective, I guess. I think both sides are gorgeous. But as far as the actual, you know, moss stitch, this is the right side. And as always, I'm going to give you the multiples so you can make this piece as wide or as narrow as you want to. So, that being said, let's get started, shall we? Okay, so as always, first things first, the base chain. Quite simply, all you need is an odd number of chains. So you can make this as wide or as narrow as you want to. As always, I strongly suggest work up a swatch first. That way you can determine, well, do you want to go up or down as far as the hook size based on your gauge and your tension. Also, you can figure out, all right, how many stitches in width that you would need for the desired width of your project. Swatching is a fabulous thing. It is highly underrated, and I strongly recommend it. So, get your number of stitches, an odd number of stitches, and we shall get started. By the way, this is the same yarn. It's Red Heart Super Saver in, I believe it's the colorway of Aran. Now, the reason why I'm using a regular solid color of yarn is I think that as gorgeous as I think that this is, I think it's a little too busy, and I want to be as clear as I can be for the sake of this tutorial. So, odd number of chains, and we shall get started. Alrighty, so row 1 is going to be our foundation row setup for the rest of the piece, and there are, you know, 2 different ways that you could go about doing this, one of which would be to go into the top of the V, as I like to call it. Just go underneath that top loop and pull up a loop, and then go into the next and pull up a loop, and into the next and pull up a loop. So that's one way that you could do it. The other way, which is a little bit more fiddly, but it does produce a cleaner bottom edge, and also sometimes it also reduces the amount of curling, is if you go into the back bump of each chain. That is another way that you could do this. So I'm going to show you that. So into the back bump, like so. Takes a little bit more time, but it does produce a cleaner edge. And then into the back bump, just pulling up loops as we go. And by the way, I did a total of 15 chains for this swatch for today, you can do any odd number. Also, I think that this would look incredible in an ombre. You know, any sort of color changing yarn, I think it would look gorgeous. So I got a couple more. Oops. I can do this. Also, of course, it does help if your initial chain is a little bit on the loose side. It is something that I constantly struggle with, you know, loosening my tension, you know, not having quite such a death grip, but, you know, old habits die hard. Okay, so at this point, we should have a total of 15 chains, you know, that are now stitches on our hook here. So I've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13, 14, and 15. Okay, so that was the forward pass. Now for the return pass, going to chain up 1, like so, and then yarn over and pull through 2. There we go. Yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Going to do that all the way back to the beginning until we just have 1 loop left on our hook. So this is the easy row. I mean, the other rows are easy, but this is the really easy one because we're just doing a setup row. Not a big deal. And then we can get into the actual 2-row repeat for the pattern. All right, so even though we did a forward pass and a back pass, I'm going to count that as being row 1. It's sort of like in the olden days when I was a kid using a typewriter, you know, clickety-clackety, you know, typing your way across, and then you hit the return lever, and then it goes back to the beginning, you know, sort of like that. So this is the foundation of row 1. Okay. Okay, so row 2, we're actually going to start in on the actual pattern. Now, upon close examination of our stitches, we have the front bar, which is what we usually work with when we do the simple Tunisian stitch, or the Tunisian simple stitch, either or. Basically, we're going to be focusing on these 2 legs, the front leg and the back leg, and we're going to be going in between those to create a Tunisian knit stitch, if I'm not mistaken. I'm still learning stuff too all the time. So we have the 1 loop on our hook already, and then going in between those 2 legs, go through to the back, pull up a loop, pull it up, and like so. So it's in between those 2 legs. And also, it does not hurt to give yourself a little bit of slack, which will help to prevent your piece from curling. So from here, we're going to yarn over, and we're going to skip this next stitch. We're going to go into this next one, again, doing the knit stitch through and in between those 2 legs. Don't forget this yarn over, because this will sort of accommodate the fact that we're skipping a stitch, you know, because we need an equilibrium. We need to keep the same number of stitches. So yarning over, then going in between the legs of that stitch, pull up a loop, and there you go. Then yarn over, skip a stitch, going into the next in between the bars, yarn over, skip a stitch, going into the next in between, yarn over, skip a stitch, going into the next in between, yarn over, skip a stitch, going into the next, in between the bars. Yarn over, skip a stitch, going into the next, in between the bars. And I strongly suggest counting your stitches every row until you get used to the practice. Believe you me, it is a good thing to do. Now, at this point, we have pretty much reached the end. So into this last stitch, we're going to go underneath both bars here at the very edge and pull up a loop. So we should have 15 at this point. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, plus 3 is 15. Perfect. Okay, and then for the return pass, really simple. Again, just going to chain up 1, and then yarning over and pull through 2. Yarn over, pull through 2. Yarn over, pull through 2. Thank you. And continue until we only have 1 loop left on our hook. Easy peasy. Absolutely love it. And also, I didn't say this before, I'm using a not remarkably long cord for this swatch. You could use, if you're doing, say, a scarf project, you could use a regular Tunisian hook, one that isn't corded with a cap at the end. That's totally acceptable. If you want to do a full-sized Afghan, I would suggest go with a nice long corded one. Regardless, we are now done with row 2. Okie dokie. Okay, row 3. Row 3 is the second row of the repeat. Now, it takes a little bit of getting used to as far as reading the stitches. So right now we have our edge stitch, and then we have the solid stitch that we did before. And then over here, this is where we created that yarn over. Okay, so we need our stitches to be staggered. So in the previous row, we started with a knit stitch. Now, for the staggering to happen, we need to start with a yarn over and then do a knit stitch. That creates the staggered look. So, keeping this loop on our hook here, yarn over, and then going into that space. Again, we're going in between the legs of the stitch to create the knit stitch. It's just a little bit more open because we did that yarn over. So, yarn over, then going in between, and pulling up a loop, yarn over, going into that space there, yarn over, going into the next one. See, now that we're established, this goes really, really fast because it's almost as if you're not going into stitches, but you're sort of going into stitch spaces because of those yarn overs from the previous row. Yarn over, going into the next, yarn over, and going into the next, yarn over, and again we're skipping this solid one, going into the next open one right there, and yarn over, skipping this one right here, going into the last stitch at the end. And if I have calculated correctly, I should have 15 stitches on my hook at this point. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, another 3, that's 15. Perfect. Okay, so the return pass, chain up 1, then yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and so on and so forth until you only have one loop left on your hook. I haven't done a lot of Tunisian in quite some time, but I don't know. I love the fluidity, how the stitches work. I mean, granted, every row, it's like you're doing twice as much work, but it creates such beautiful textures. You know, it's got such a great squoosh to it, I tell you. If you haven't tried it, you don't know what you're missing. All right, so that is row 3. So we're going to do a couple of repeats because I like to be thorough and spending time with you guys. Now, obviously, this doesn't look like terribly much because we're just using a solid color. But if you were to change colors, it really becomes a lot more pronounced. But for right now, you know, we're going to stick with the solid color because, you know, we're crawling, we're not sprinting. All right, so let's keep going with a repeat or two. All right, so row 2 for the repeat. Now, as you can see here, we have a space right here because we started off with a yarn over, which means we need to go into that stitch for the repeat of row 2. So do not yarn over, just go directly into that stitch there, pull up a loop, and then we have to yarn over and skip this stitch, this solid stitch, and go into the next open space stitch. Yarn over, skip one, going into the next. Yarn over, skip one, going into the next. Yarn over, skip one, going into the next. Yarn over, skip, going into the next. Yarn over, skip one, going into the next. And last but not least, stitch into this last stitch. And I strongly suggest go underneath both of those bars in the last stitch. It creates a much cleaner, nicer, neater finished edge, believe you me. All right, so 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and 15. Awesome. Chain up 1, yarn over, and pull through 2. Yarn over, pull through 2, pull through 2, pull through 2, and so on and so forth. Okay, get rid of my little knot right here. Come on, work with me. Thank you. Okay, we're almost there. Pull through 2, pull through 2, and pull through 2. Lovely. So then, for row 3, for the repeat, again, we have a solid stitch here, so we need to start off with a yarn over. Yarn over, skipping that stitch, going into the next space, and pull up a loop, yarn over, skip, into the next stitch, yarn over, skip, going into the next stitch, yarn over, skip, going into the next, yarn over, skip, going into the next, yarn over, skip, going into the next, yarn over, and skip, and then going into the last stitch. Because we started with a yarn over, we end with a yarn over, not including the edge stitches. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and 15. Love it. Okay, a little bit more yarn. Okie dokie. So, as per usual, chain up 1, yarn over, and pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and so on and so forth until we reach 1 loop left on the hook. Now also you can control the density of your fabric, the weave, if you will. Me, as I've said before, I like a nice open drape. That's why I use a large hook size. If you want it to be more robust, a more solid fabric, by all means, go down in a hook size or 2. That's totally fine. All right, then going back to row 2. Okay, so right here, as you can see, we have a yarn over space. So we're going to go into that space, pull up a loop, yarn over, skip, going into the next, yarn over, skip, going into the next, yarn over, and skip, going into the next, yarn over, skip, going into the next, yarn over, skip, going into the next, yarn over, skip, going into the next, and go into that last stitch, pull up a loop, and we should have 15. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and 15. Okay, good stuff. Very good stuff. Okay, so from here, chain up 1, yarn over, and pull through 2. Yarn over, through 2, and so forth, until you have just 1 loop left on your hook. And we're going to do 1 more row, and then I will show you the bind off for those of you that are not familiar with it, which is totally fine. Okay, so row 3 for the repeat. So we're starting off here with a solid stitch, so we need to start with a yarn over, space over the solid, solid over the space, same diff. Okay, so yarn over, going into that next stitch, yarn over, skip, going into the next, 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 and scoot your stitches down, yarn over, skip, going into the next, yarn over, skip, going into the last. There. Okay, so from here, again, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and 15. Counting is highly underrated. Can't recommend it enough. So chain up 1, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and so forth until, of course, you have just 1 stitch left on your hook. And there you are. Gorgeousness. I mean, with a solid plain colorway, it's subtle, but it is still quite gorgeous. Absolutely love it. All right, so that is all you have to do. Just keep repeating rows 2 and 3 for as long as you want your, finished piece to be. Okie dokie. So when you are ready to do your bind off, there are, of course, a number of different ways that you can do it. Going to, show you two ways that you could do it. One of which is you could continue on with using the knit stitch, which would be to go in between those two bars once again and pull up a loop, and then pull that first loop through the second loop as your bind off, and then go in between the next two, pull up a loop, then pull the first through the second. However, I'm not a particular fan of this. Pull up a loop, going in through the second. Now, the reason why I'm not a particular fan is because it really does produce a significant curl to the top edge. As you can see, these stitches are the ones that we just did, and it's curling forward quite a bit. So I'm going to show you what I'm going to present as my preferred method, which would be to go through the front-facing bars only while we do our bind off. You know, to each their own is what I always say. So going underneath this front bar here and pull up a loop, then pull through the first through the second, again through the front bar, pull up a loop, pull the front, the first through the second. It's a little less tension this way than going through as a knit stitch. So then again, through the front-facing bar, pull up a loop, first through the second, and so on and so forth until we reach the very end. Through that front bar, pull up a loop. It also helps if you, give that loop that you're pulling up a little bit of slack. Pull the first through the second, underneath the next bar, pull up a loop, first through the second, pull up a loop, first through the second, and so on and so forth. I'm just going to work my way across. And we've got two more. Right in there. There we go. And then, of course, last but not least, into that edge stitch, be sure to go underneath both of those bars at the edge there. Pull up a loop, pull the first through the second, and then you can clip your yarn, pull out your tail, and sew in your ends. Now, the other reason why I think I prefer this method is also because we started with a Tunisian simple stitch first row for our foundation. So by doing this, it sort of polishes it and finishes it in the same way that we started. So there you are. Ta-da! The Tunisian moss stitch. Gorgeousness. Alrighty, my dears, so that's going to conclude today's tutorial on the Tunisian moss stitch. Really hope that you liked it, and if you did, please hit that thumbs up button down below. You know that I appreciate your appreciation. And stay tuned for more, whether it's crocheting or knitting, audiobook narration, lots of stuff on this channel. So hit that subscribe button if you please. And in the comments section down below, right down there, I want to hear, what are you going to be doing with this stitch? What sort of projects, yarns, colorways? Always curious to hear about your creative process. And until next time, you know what to do, right? I want all of you to stay inspired, stay caffeinated, stay stitching, and please stay safe. Take care of yourselves and each other, and I will see you in my next video. Bye for now, everybody, and have a great day.